It was the year 1857, a time when global trade was at its peak. England was deep in the game, importing spices and silk from far-off lands. One day, bad luck struck. A French ship didn't just bring silk and spices to England. It carried an unknown danger. A zombie virus that spread like wildfire, and in no time millions were dead, turned into zombies. Those still alive turned to deadly Chinese and Japanese fighting skills, learning swordplay and tricks to take on these monsters. The government, desperate to stop the crisis, built a massive wall around London, called the Grand Barrier. This thing was 100 feet tall, surrounded by a deep canal that circled both the city and the wall. The strip of land between the wall and the canal, they called it the In-Between, a dangerous zone where zombies and humans often clashed in bloody battles. But then came the Second Battle of Kent, and it was a disaster. One of the bridges over the canal collapsed, and zombies tore through every human in the area, ripping them apart. That defeat drove the king to the edge of madness. After the war ended, he ordered all but one bridge destroyed to keep zombies out of the city for good. Even so, London's rich folks ditched the city, moving to their fortified mansions and estates. One day, Colonel Darcy showed up at an estate in Hertfordshire County. Word was someone there had been attacked by a zombie. The wealthy folks around here were living in bunkers now. As soon as Darcy stepped inside the bunker, they checked him out head to toe. Then he met the people and explained to the lady in charge, Mrs. Featherstone, why he was there. Featherstone flat out denied anyone among them was infected. But she forgot one thing. A newly infected person doesn't show signs until they go after their first victim. Anyway, Darcy came prepared. He'd brought some special flies with him. He popped open a vial and let them loose in the air. In just a few seconds, those flies landed right on Featherstone's face. Quick as a flash, Darcy smashed a glass and took her out. But it was too late. The infection had already spread to others. Not far from there was Mr. Bennet's fortress, where he lived cut off from the world with his wife and 5 daughters. All 5 of those girls were drop-dead gorgeous, and every one of them had trained in Shaolin fighting skills from China, ready to take on any zombie that came their way. Now their mom was starting to stress about getting them married. Right around then, word got out that Captain Bingley, who'd come to the area a week ago to wipe out zombies, had scored a big win. Bingley was single, and tonight he was headed to Mrs. Featherstone's mansion to celebrate the victory. Mrs. Bennet wasn't about to let this chance slip. She convinced her husband and got her daughters ready to go. The 5 sisters got decked out like they were heading into battle. Elizabeth, the oldest, couldn't care less about marriage or that kind of stuff, but she gave in to her mom's nagging and got all dressed up for the party. A little while later, Captain Bingley showed up with his 2 sisters, and Darcy was with them too. The whole party was buzzing about how loaded they were. Then Bingley's eyes landed on Jane. Her beauty hit him like a spell. He didn't waste a second and asked her to dance. And man, did they hit the dance floor hard, having a blast. Meanwhile, Darcy was just standing off to the side with Bingley's sisters, looking all gloomy. Seeing this, Bingley pulled him to a corner and said, "Dude, Jane's sister's pretty hot too. Go talk to her. Ask her to dance." Elizabeth, meanwhile, had her eyes on them. She crept closer and started eavesdropping. That's when Darcy said, "Nah, she's totally average. Girls like that aren't my type. You'd have to be a real loser to fall for her at this party." Those words hit Elizabeth like a slap in the face. She was so mad her hand bumped a glass, and it shattered. Fuming, she stormed outside, only to run right into Mrs. Featherstone, who'd turned into a zombie. Elizabeth was floored. Featherstone started to say, "I've got a huge secret to tell you," but before she could finish, Darcy took her out for good. Maybe she was about to spill something about him. Just then, zombies crashed the party inside. But instead of running, the 5 sisters went full-on beast mode, tearing into the zombies like a storm. Man, they caused some serious chaos. Seeing Elizabeth in action, Darcy's heart skipped a beat right then and there. He'd been searching for a partner like her for years. But too bad. He'd already screwed up big time by insulting her. To Elizabeth, he was just some arrogant jerk, and she wouldn't give him the time of day. Still, her sisters thought they'd make a great couple, and were all secretly hoping she'd marry him. The next day, Jane got a letter from Bingley inviting her over for tea. Their mom wasn't about to let this opportunity pass. So even with bad weather, she sent Jane off to Bingley's mansion. Jane hopped on her horse and headed out. Partway down the road, a zombie popped up, and her horse bolted, leaving her stranded. She tried to shoot the zombie, but her pistol blew up in her hand. Somehow, she pulled herself together, grabbed a knife, and went to town on the zombie, taking it down in no time. Then she spotted an infected woman holding her infected baby. Out of nowhere, the woman lunged at Jane, attacking her. It had been over a day since Jane left, and she still hadn't come home. Elizabeth rushed to the mansion and found out Jane was sick. A doctor showed up right after, and under Darcy's watch, they checked Jane's wounds. To top it off, Darcy released his special flies over Jane and stood ready with a knife. But Elizabeth swooped in, caught the flies, and totally wrecked his plan. By then, the doctor had results. They figured out the wound on Jane's hand wasn't from a zombie bite. A few days later, she was back to normal. When her mom came to pick her up, Bingley brought up marrying Jane. For the Bennet family, this match was like hitting the jackpot. But Darcy was against it. He didn't want his buddy making a dumb move in the middle of this zombie plague. In that area, there was an orphanage that wasn't what it used to be. Sad to say, the kids there had all turned into zombies. Around the same time when the girls got home, they found out their only cousin, Mr. Collins, was visiting. The guy they all thought was a total goof. Then their dad dropped a bomb. That same goof could legally kick them out of the house if anything happened to him. Turns out Mr. Collins was a priest at Queen Catherine's royal palace in London and the sole heir to the Bennet family. By law, the estate would go to the son, so keeping things cool with Collins was a must. Things got even better when Collins himself brought up marrying Jane. He had a thing for her and came with a proposal, but Mrs. Bennet shut it down, saying Jane was already set to marry Captain Bingley. She added that her other daughter, Elizabeth, was just as gorgeous as Jane. She suggested Collins could marry her instead. Collins was down for it, but Elizabeth wasn't about to agree so easily. Still, her mom nagged her into going with Collins to Bingley's party. After traveling a bit, they spotted a horse-drawn carriage that looked like it had been hit by zombies. Hearing their footsteps, a woman stumbled out of the carriage, still thinking she was safe, but they quickly snapped her out of that illusion. Meanwhile, for tonight's party, Bingley had called in a ton of soldiers to keep things secure, including Lieutenant Wickham. He was smooth and practical in conversation, but the second he saw Darcy and his buddy Bingley, his whole vibe changed. Elizabeth noticed, and after they left, asked Wickham what the bad blood was about. Wickham spilled the tea. "When my dad died in the Second Battle of Kent, Darcy's dad took me in. Before he passed, he left me a huge inheritance. But after he was gone, Darcy snatched it all from me. That guy's ego's off the charts. I could have fought him for my rights, but out of respect for his dad's kindness, I let it go." Hearing all this, Elizabeth's respect for Wickham shot up. When he asked her to meet him at the party later, she couldn't say no. Deep down, she was kinda into him. But at the party that evening, Collins crashed their moment. Family pressure meant Elizabeth couldn't just brush him off, so to keep things cool, she danced with him. Meanwhile, Darcy was quietly hoping to win Elizabeth over. During some chatter, a big secret came up. Darcy was Queen Catherine's nephew, but only a few people knew it. Collins was one of those in the know. Still, this didn't faze Elizabeth one bit. She wanted nothing to do with a selfish, arrogant guy like Darcy. Over on the side, Elizabeth's mom was plastered from drinking, slurring on and on about how Jane's marriage would make them rich. Darcy overheard this. Was Jane really just pretending to love Bingley for his money? If Darcy thought that, it could spell trouble for Jane. Anyway, after a ton of dancing and partying, Elizabeth finally got a moment of peace, until she realized her younger sister had vanished. She went looking for her toward the kitchen. Just then, Bingley showed up to grab some dessert, but before he could, zombies dragged his chef away. If Elizabeth had been a second slower, things could have gone south fast. She convinced Bingley to stay put and went in herself, but then a zombie yanked Bingley down the stairs. Right before it could bite him, Elizabeth saved his skin. Turns out these zombies were kids from the nearby orphanage. Elizabeth asked the zombies how they got there. One of them said, "Your friend's with us. He showed us the way." Before he could name names, Darcy barged in and, in a flash, took out all the zombies, tossing them into an oven. During the chaos, Darcy thought Bingley might be infected. Right before he could finish him off, Elizabeth told him Bingley wasn't infected. He'd just fallen down the stairs. Bingley's mansion wasn't safe anymore, but he still didn't want to leave. Ditching the place would mean being away from Jane. So Darcy made up an excuse about visiting his sister and dragged Bingley along. Bingley's sister wrote Jane a letter spilling the details. When Elizabeth read it, she got worried Bingley might change if he went to the royal palace. But Jane was dead sure about her love for him. At breakfast, Mr. Collins finally told Elizabeth how he felt. But Elizabeth was totally against marrying without love. Her dad backed her up. This sparked a big fight between her and her mom. and in a fit of anger, Elizabeth stormed off toward the woods. Meanwhile, Collins proposed to their third daughter, and that deal actually went through. In the woods, Elizabeth ran into Wickham. That night at the party, he'd seen her with Collins and bailed early. Elizabeth explained she was only with Collins because her mom pressured her, so Wickham still had a shot at winning her over. He took her to a special spot, an old church packed with zombies. They were being fed soup made from animal brains. Elizabeth freaked out seeing this, but Wickham explained that an infected person doesn't fully turn into a zombie until they eat human brains. This soup kept them infected, but stopped them from going full zombie, satisfying their hunger so they could live with regular people without causing harm. With Mr. Collins's help, Elizabeth went to meet London's Queen Catherine to talk about this. Wickham was just a regular lieutenant, but Elizabeth made his dream come true by getting him a meeting with the Queen. When the discussion started, Lady Catherine laughed off Wickham's idea. She didn't believe zombies could ever live with humans. Wickham argued that one right decision could end this war, especially since half of London's population was already hit by the zombie virus. But no one in the room was buying what Wickham was saying. Late that night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep because of the new place. She went for a walk and saw someone coming toward her in the dark. It was Wickham, trying to pour his heart out to her. But Elizabeth shut him down fast, saying, "Know your place." When he was out of options, Wickham tried to stir up trouble by filling Elizabeth's head with lies. He told her Darcy was behind, splitting up Jane and Bingley, saying he'd convinced Bingley that Jane didn't love him and was only after his money. Hearing this, Elizabeth was pissed and ready to explode. The next morning, Darcy showed up with a marriage proposal for Elizabeth. She shot it down hard. No way was she marrying a guy who deliberately wrecked her sister's happiness. With that, Elizabeth went off on Darcy. The fight got so intense that buttons were popping off both their shirts. In the middle of it, Elizabeth hit him with a direct question. "Did you tell Bingley we're just gold diggers?" Darcy, calm and quiet, said he'd heard it straight from Elizabeth's mom's mouth. But he didn't pull Bingley away from Jane because of money. He did it to save his life from the zombie plague. As for kicking Wickham out of any inheritance, total lie. Turns out Darcy wasn't the jerk Elizabeth thought he was. He was actually in the right. Realizing this, Elizabeth felt awful about her choice and broke down crying. A few days later, Elizabeth got a letter from Darcy. In it, he laid out Wickham's true colors. It was true that Darcy's dad had taken Wickham in, but he didn't leave him any inheritance. Still, after he passed, Darcy gave Wickham half his share. Wickham blew it all on partying and then kept hounding Darcy for more cash. That's why Darcy cut ties with him. In this zombie mess, Darcy didn't want to lose his best friend Bingley, but he failed. Bingley still loved Jane as much as ever. There were some things Darcy could never bring himself to tell Elizabeth. He'd accepted that her love wasn't in the cards for him. He wrote this letter during London's siege. A huge horde of zombies had taken over London, and once they got control of the city, their power shot up 100 times. The Queen's next move was to trap the zombies inside London's massive wall, no matter what. If they failed, Hertfordshire might not survive either, so they had to start prepping their defenses now. But then another disaster hit. Elizabeth's younger sister Lydia had been kidnapped by Wickham. He threw out a challenge. If anyone had the guts, they could try rescuing Lydia from the St. Lazarus prison, a zombie stronghold. Right away, Elizabeth and Jane hit the road. They met up with Darcy and filled him in. Darcy said St. Lazarus had been swallowed by the ground 4 days ago, and Lydia was probably already dead. But that wasn't the full story. St. Lazarus was actually on the other side of the Hingham Bridge, which was set to be blown up at sunrise tomorrow. If Elizabeth crossed over, she wouldn't make it back. So Darcy lied to her and set out alone to save Lydia, bringing along the brains of fallen soldiers to pull off something wild. When he got there, he found out it was a trap. Wickham had set it up to lure Darcy in. He knew Darcy would come for Lydia because of Elizabeth, but trapping Darcy wasn't that easy. Darcy fed the brains he brought to the locked-up zombies, turning them rabid. Meanwhile, he freed Lydia and told her to haul ass across the Hingham Bridge. Then he started fighting Wickham. Wickham was the one leading the zombies to take over London, and he'd even guided them to the party that night. Meanwhile, Elizabeth showed up too. She'd figured out Darcy's lie. She saw Lydia riding back toward the bridge on horseback, but Darcy wasn't with her, and that freaked Elizabeth out. She went looking for him. The sun was about to rise. Lydia had safely crossed the bridge, but there was no sign of Darcy or Elizabeth. Back at the fight, Darcy finally drove his sword through Wickham's chest, but Wickham didn't die. He was already infected. A second later, Wickham started overpowering him. Just then, Elizabeth burst in, and together they finished Wickham off for good. They started heading back. On the other side, Bingley waited for them until sunrise. But when they didn't show, he had no choice but to order the bridge blown up. Right then, Darcy and Elizabeth appeared on the bridge. But it was too late. A massive explosion went off. By some miracle, they both made it out alive. In the end, both buddies married the two sisters.